Hello again and welcome to ISAC Software Academy Linux course. In this lesson we will be covering how to mount a partition using the mount command and the fstab file. A quick note is that fstab would be the correct pronunciation, as this is the file system table. However, it is commonly referred to as fstab. When coming from a Microsoft Windows background, mounting a file system is quite often an alien concept for most people. In a Windows environment, mounting of a partition is done automatically and transparently to the user. In Linux environments, this is beginning to be the case. However, it is generally accepted that you would use mount or the fstab file to mount a partition that you wish to actually access. Mounting a partition is all about the operating system being able to read and or write to that partition. The most common case where you would need to mount a partition other than that of the operating system would be in the case of a CD, DVD or Blu-ray disc. One could also argue that the more common these days would be the need to mount a USB drive of some description. In modern Ubuntu distributions, this is done automatically in the graphical user interface. However, it is still good to know how to mount a partition in case you are using a different distribution that does not yet include automatic mounting, or in the case where automatic mounting becomes broken. As you can see, written here, I have stated that mounting a partition is done using the mount command, which I've already stated. The mount command is used to mount any partition with a file system that it recognizes. When you're using the mount command without specifying a file system type, the mount command will attempt to guess the file system type automatically. This is not always successful. However, in at least 90% of cases it will do so correctly. If you absolutely have to, you can specify a -t parameter, which will be able to be used to specify the type of file system. In the example I have provided here, I have used the mount command to mount /dev/sdb1 to the directory /mnt, which is short for mount, /cd-rom. Now, this device may not actually be a CD-ROM. This is a common directory used for CD-ROMs, DVD-ROMs, Blu-ray ROMs, or their burners. The first seeming directory that is listed should be read as device, which is what dev is short for, and SDB1 means serial device, and B is the second device, so it would be the hard drive, most likely being SDA, and 1 is the first partition. This is not to be confused with other commands that may use a 0, such as the grub bootloader would use a 0 to reference the first element. Those of you familiar with common programming languages such as C and C++ would be familiar with the count from 0 approach. This command, or at least the devices, are not listed in this fashion. As I mentioned, the mount command has the -t parameter that you can specify to give a particular type of partition during the mounting. This is not the only parameter that can be specified. -h will print out a help message for you, as well as the -a parameter will mount all of the file systems listed in fstab. The -r parameter, which will mount the file system read-only, which means that there can be no write access, so you cannot in fact save a file on that file system until you mount it as read-write, which is done by another parameter, which is rw, or simply -w. If using the rw, you need to use --rw for it to work. This was not listed here, as it is in fact the default, so if read-only is not specified, by default it will be mounted as read-write. The mount command works hand in hand with the fstab file, which can be done automatically using the fstab file by simply specifying the partitions that you wish to mount with the options that you wish for that partition. This file can be edited directly using any text editor. The options used in the fstab file will be very familiar once you are used to the mount program's options, and as such will be very simplistic to use at a later date. What I have not covered here is how to unmount a file system. This is done very simplistically by using the umount program, which is simply umount, and can be specified without any parameters other than the partition in which you wish to unmount. We will now step into the more practical side of this lesson, and I will show you how to use the mount command and the fstab file, as well as the umount command. You will note that I actually specify it as a command, but technically speaking it is in fact a program that is part of the tools that are generally associated with Linux, but also BSD. Now, the mount command, as I specified, has a -h parameter, which, as you can see, lists out its various options. These options can be used for various mounting tasks. The -v, as an example, will give you the version, which, as you can see here, is part of the util-linux package, and the version is 2.20.1. With the other options, it has listed there the usage and then a description of what that usage does. As an example, utilizing mount without any parameters will list the mounted file systems, which you can see is explained there. By doing the mount command, you can see this now, and this has a list of all of the file systems that are presently mounted on this system. Now, you can scroll through text such as this large amount here, by going up a page or two or several more by holding down the Shift key and hitting the page up key. Once you do that, you'll reach the top in this instance, and you can do page down to go down one, and then again down to the bottom. Also note that you can go to the top, and as soon as you type something, it will go straight back down to where you are presently at. Now, you may notice that the options listed here are different to what you have already covered. These are listed very similarly to what you would see in the fstab file. This is a format that you should probably get familiar with, and something like this is very common, where it states that it is a read-write mount, that it is no execute, that it is... These are used for not directly executing any binaries on this partition, and this is to not set any user IDs, and this stands for no set user identification specifically, because it is designed to not set the user identification bits. The GID is the group ID, which is set to 5, and the mode is used to change the mode, which by default is 0600. In this case, it has been changed to 0620, and this is specifically because it is a dev PTS file system, and these modes are specific to a specific type of default, which is the message Y default on a newly created PTY. I have now inserted the Ubuntu installation disk. As you can see, it has popped up and asked me if I want to open it with a package manager. I do not in this instance. It has actually automatically mounted this, which I did not want, but is stock standard for Ubuntu installations. So I'm going to cancel, and I am also going to right click here and unfortunately have to do it the manual way, as the only option is eject. So I will be using the umount command to unmount the CD-ROM, which in this instance is actually a Blu-ray drive, but it doesn't know the difference. At this point it looks like it's still mounted due to the disk icon down the bottom here. However, it is in fact not, which can be demonstrated by listing the contents, which obviously gives you a direct link here, which you can see is a link here from /dev/cd-rom to SR0. SR0 in this case would be the device. Now, to see that it is not mounted, one can simply type in the location that it is meant to be at, which is here in /media, and this is the default. A lot of older, more experienced Linux users will still use the /mnt folder. However, in the case of Ubuntu's automatic mounting, it generally goes into /media and then / the device name. So if you hit enter, you'll see absolutely nothing in there. However, when we use the mount command, on this device. To fix the issue of this not working in current Ubuntu installations, what I'm going to do is go to the /media directory, which, as you can see, presently has a few things already listed. Now, in this instance, I'm actually going to make a directory called CD-ROM 0. Apparently I'm going to do so with super user permissions, and at that point I can now do the command I did before with a destination, and at that point it will actually want me to do it as root again. So I'll type in the command again, and this time it should work, and there you have it. It's now mounted. The reason it had to be done this difficultly is because it has been changed from the way it used to work. Since it's now done automatically and utilizes this directory here, which is the name of the media that's actually being mounted, it's done entirely automatically in that regard. However, upon doing a listing, you will see that I've unmounted the Ubuntu 12.04 directory, and I have remounted it under CD-ROM 0, which I can show you simply by listing the directory. And as you can see, it is the installation disk. At this point, it would be a good time to unmount this partition. And I have again forgotten to become sudo to do it. And we should now take a look at the fstab file, which you can find in the /etc or etc directory. And as you can see, in this instance there are only two partitions that are mounted, which is the swap partition, which is the same that you'll find on a Microsoft Windows install. It is to augment your system memory, and the / directory, which is the entire Linux partition in this particular case. Now, if we go through and remount the CD drive, or Blu-ray drive in this instance, then I'm sorry, I've done it backwards. dev/sr0 to /media/cd-rom 0, you'll find that that annoying pop-up comes back up again, and when you list the fstab, it has not changed. However, if you unmount it, again, sudo unmount, and then mount it via the graphical interface and list it out again, it's also not listed there now. However, where it is listed is in another file called mtab, which you can see listed right here. Now, you saw mention of mtab previously. This file lists only the mounted devices and is quite similar to the fstab file, but the mtab file is automatically updated by the mount command, whereas the fstab file is not. Just quickly, we will cover some of the things in the fstab file. As you can see, there is some information here which is obviously an identifier for the drive. Now this lists where it is mounted, and this here is what type of file system it is, and it specifies here if there are any errors to remount as read-only, which is finished on the other line down here. This covers the fstab file and mounting other partitions. Thank you.